The sky over Arcturus 6 didn't just change color, it bruised. Jonas Hale stood on the edge of the northern Badlands, watching the horizon flicker with the violent, rhythmic pulse of an oncoming electromagnetic superstorm. On this planet, the air didn't just hold moisture, it held a grudge. The clouds were heavy with metallic dust and ionized gas, swirling in shades of deep indigo and necrotic purple. Each flash of lightning was followed by a thunderous boom that felt less like sound and more like a physical blow to the chest. He had 40 minutes. Jonas was 37 years old, a man whose face was a map of frontier worlds and failed expectations. He was a xenogeologist for the Galactic Survey Initiative, a job that essentially paid him to be as far away from other human beings as possible. He was selectively social, as he liked to put it. His ex-wife had called it emotional desertion. Jonas preferred the company of rocks. They didn't ask you to be someone you weren't. They didn't grow disappointed when you missed dinner because you were fascinated by a mineral vein. With methodical, trembling efficiency, he sealed his final crystalline specimens into magnetically shielded containers. These crystals, translucent lattices that seemed to glow with a faint, trapped light, were the only reason he endured this hellhole. They were born of the very storms that now threatened to vaporize him. "Survey station, this is Hale," he spoke into his helmet comms, his voice a dry rasp. He knew the signal wouldn't clear the ionosphere, but the suit recorded it for the black box. Samples secured at Grid 77 Alpha. Moving to shelter. If the Faraday cage fails, tell the initiative my final report is in the encrypted drive. And tell my sister she was right about the weather. He loaded the heavy crates onto his hover sled. The wind was already screaming, a 150 km/h gale that threatened to turn his equipment into shrapnel. Jonas leaned into the wind, his armored environmental suit whining as the stabilization servos fought to keep him upright. To anyone else, this was a death trap. To Jonas, it was Tuesday. He had spent 6 months on Arcturus 6, a world usually restricted to 2-week rotations. He liked the honesty of a planet that tried to kill you openly. It was much easier to handle than the subtle, smiling betrayals of civilization. He reached his shelter, a reinforced bunker half buried in a granite outcropping, just as the first arc of plasma hit the grounding rods. The world turned white. The roar was deafening. He hauled the sled into the airlock, sealed the heavy lead-line doors, and slumped against the wall as the pressure equalized. He was safe. He was alone. He was exactly where he wanted to be. The shelter was a masterpiece of paranoid engineering. Jonas had salvaged parts from 3 different abandoned outposts to reinforce the walls. It was a Faraday cage within a bunker, insulated against heat that could melt glass and radiation that could scramble DNA. He stripped off his suit, revealing a lean frame and skin pale from months of artificial light. He moved through his post-survey routine with the grace of a monk. Check the seals. Monitor the power cells. Heat the ration pack. Beef stew that tasted like salted cardboard. He sat at his small workstation, the walls humming with the vibration of the storm outside. He felt the familiar prickle of static on his skin. He was lifting a spoonful of stew to his mouth when the proximity alarm shrieked. Jonas froze. The sensor was calibrated to ignore electrical discharge. It only triggered for large electromagnetic signatures or biological movement. Impossible, he thought. Nothing lives out there. The display showed a red, 50 meters away and closing fast. It was moving with a frantic, staggering gait. Then came the sound. Not the roar of the wind, but a rhythmic, desperate pounding on the outer hatch. Thump, thump, thump. Jonas stared at the door. To open it was madness. A direct lightning strike while the door was cycling could fry the entire shelter's electronics. But the pounding continued, growing weaker. God damn it, Jonas hissed. He slammed the emergency override. This is going to be the mistake that kills me. The airlock hissed. The outer hatch cracked open. For a split second, the interior of the shelter was illuminated by a blinding arc of blue plasma from the sky. A figure, draped in scorched, blackened armor, tumbled through the gap. The hatch slammed shut, and the airlock cycled with a violent hiss. The figure collapsed onto the floor, trailing smoke and the pungent scent of burnt ozone. Jonas stood back, his hand gripping a heavy torque wrench, the only weapon he had. The armor was high-grade military spec, but it was battered beyond belief. The helmet's auto-release triggered, the damaged seals wheezing as the faceplate retracted. Jonas found himself looking down at a Valkyrie. She was young, her skin a deep obsidian purple common to the warrior castes. Her compound eyes were wide, swirling with the kaleidoscopic patterns of extreme shock. Her mandibles clicked frantically, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. The Valkyrie and humans were not at war, but they were not friends. They were rivals in a cold, bureaucratic expansion. Briefings warned that Valkyrie were hyperlogical, military-driven, and physically superior. But the girl on his floor didn't look superior. She looked like a broken bird. When her eyes finally focused on Jonas, a lone, scruffy human in a dim bunker, she let out a sharp, clicking shriek. She tried to scramble backward, her injured leg dragging, her hands clawing for a sidearm that was missing. "Easy," Jonas said, holding his hands up, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're in a shelter. The storm. You survived the storm." His translator struggled to keep up with her rapid, panicked clicks. Human. Trap. Death den. Era. "My name is Jonas," he said, speaking slowly. "You're safe. I have medical supplies. I have heat. Just breathe." She slumped back against the wall, her chest heaving. The terror in her eyes didn't vanish, but it was slowly being eclipsed by the sheer weight of her exhaustion. They were trapped together for the next 12 hours. The first hour was a standoff. Jonas returned to his desk. He went back to his stew, though it was cold and tasted even worse now. He didn't look at her. He knew from his readings that Valkyrie were territorial and easily spooked by direct eye contact. He gave her the one thing he valued most: space. He heard her armor hiss as she manually disengaged the chest plate. He heard the ragged sound of her breathing. "You're going to freeze," Jonas said without turning around. He grabbed an emergency thermal blanket, a high-tech foil wrap, and tossed it over his shoulder toward her. "The heaters are capped to save power for the shields. Use that, or your blood will turn to slush." He heard the rustle of the foil. "Why?" Her voice came through the translator, metallic and suspicious. "Why help? Galactic law says. Arcturus 6 is contested. You should claim me as prisoner." Jonas snorted, a dry, bitter sound. "I'm a geologist, Kira. I don't give a damn about galactic law or contested zones. I care about crystalline structures and not having a corpse in my living room. It's bad for the feng shui." "Kira. I saw the nameplate on your armor," he said. "Kira of House Vexen. Scout. 3rd Division. Right. You read our script." "I read everything," Jonas replied. "I'm a persistence predator from Earth. We're wired to gather information until we find a pattern. My pattern says you're a scout who got caught in a storm you weren't prepared for. My pattern also says you're in a lot of pain." He finally turned his chair. She was wrapped in a blanket, her long, pointed ears, the most expressive part of Valkyrie physiology, pinned flat against her head. "Humans are violent," she clicked. "The elders say you are the great unpredictables. That you help only when there is a profit. What is your profit here?" Jonas looked at the ceiling, listening to the thunderous roar of the storm above. "My profit is having someone to talk to who doesn't mind if I'm a bit of an asshole. Now, let me see that leg." The third hour brought the first crisis. A statistical impossibility occurred. A superbolt, a massive accumulation of static charge, hit the shelter's primary grounding rod with such force that it bypassed the surge protectors. The shelter groaned. Alarms wailed. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the eerie red glow of emergency power. "Heating array is offline," Jonas muttered, checking his tablet. "Couplings are fried. Damn it." The temperature in the bunker began to drop instantly. On Arcturus 6, the ambient temperature during a storm could hit 80 below zero. I can assist, Kira said, struggling to stand. Her military training was fighting through her injuries. I am a scout. I have field repair certifications. Sit down, Kira. You can barely stand. And you cannot reach the secondary conduit while holding the diagnostic scanner, she countered, her mandibles set in a grim line. We are in the same cage, human. If you die, I die. That is logic. They worked together in the dim red light. It was a dance of necessity. Jonas held the panels open, his fingers numbing, while Kira reached into the narrow, jagged spaces of the machinery, her thinner, multi-jointed fingers working the delicate wiring. Now, Jonas shouted over the roar of a secondary strike. Bridge the blue and green. Kira jammed the wires together. Sparks flew, singing her exoskeleton, but she didn't flinch. The hum of the heaters returned, a low, vibrating song of survival. They both slumped to the floor, breathing heavily in the cold air. You didn't quit, Kira observed, looking at Jonas's shaking hands. Most species. If the odds are that low, they accept the end. You were shouting at the wires like they were enemies. Jonas leaned his head against the cold metal wall. That's the human secret, Kira. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. We're persistence predators. We don't outrun the deer. We just walk after it until the deer's heart gives out from exhaustion. We do the same with problems. We just don't stop. Kira's ears twitched, a sign of deep thought. It is a terrifying trait. To never stop. It makes you broken. Maybe, Jonas smiled tiredly. But in a universe this hostile, being broken is the only way to fit the pieces together. By the 6th hour, the storm was at its peak. The shelter felt like a tiny bubble in a boiling cauldron of plasma. Kira was resting against the far wall. The pain medication Jonas had given her, a human-grade sedative that worked on Valkyrie in double doses, had softened her edges. Tell me, Jonas Hale, she whispered. Why are you here? Not the rocks. The real reason. Why do you choose a world with no people? Jonas stared at a small geode on his desk, its heart filled with jagged amethyst. I had a life once. A wife. A home with a lawn and neighbors who brought over cookies. But I was always looking past them. I was always looking at the horizon, wondering about the things that didn't talk back. I tried to be the man she wanted. The social man. The successful man. But it felt like wearing a suit 3 sizes too small. I was suffocating. He picked up the geode, turning it in his hands. I realized that I wasn't meant for the center of the pack. I'm the one who stays on the edge to watch the shadows. When the marriage ended, she told me I was stone cold. So, I decided to go where the stones were. It's easier to be alone by choice than to be alone in a room full of people. Kira's antennae moved in a slow, sympathetic arc. I am the opposite. I have never been alone. In House Vexen, we are a collective. My thoughts are monitored. My performance is ranked. I am a scout because it was the only way to earn enough honor points to be allowed to marry who I chose. And who did you choose? No one, she clicked sadly. I chose the right to choose. But the more I prove myself, the more they demand. It is a ladder with no top. I am tired, Jonas. I am so tired of proving I am worthy of existing. Jonas looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the same exhaustion in her eyes that he felt in his soul. They were two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy, one fleeing the crowd and one fleeing the hive, both seeking the same thing, the right to just be. You don't have to prove anything in here, Jonas said softly. The storm doesn't care about your honor points. And neither do I. The 10th hour brought a change in the wind. The thunder became a distant growl rather than a constant roar. The electromagnetic sensors showed the charge in the atmosphere was finally dispersing. Kira's communicator chirped. It was a distorted, low-frequency burst. Scout Kira. Respond. Third Division searching. She reached for the device, but paused. She looked at Jonas, then at the shelter that had saved her life. "If I report you," she said, her voice trembling, "my people will come. They will see this shelter. They will see your illegal reinforcements. They will seize this site as a strategic outpost. You will be displaced." Jonas felt a cold wash of reality. He had saved her, and in doing so, he had exposed his sanctuary. "I know. That's how the galaxy works, Kira. No good deed goes unpunished." Kira stared at the communicator. Her mandibles clenched. With a sudden violent motion, she smashed the device against the floor. Jonas gasped. "What are you doing?" "That was your ticket home. My armor has a secondary beacon," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "I will activate it once I am 2 kilometers away. I will tell them I found a natural cave. I will tell them the human surveyor died in the storm. I will keep your silence, Jonas Hale. Why? You'll lose your honor points. You'll be demoted for losing equipment." Kira stood up, wrapping the thermal blanket around her like a royal robe. "Because you gave me shelter when I was a rival. Because you treated my wounds when I was a threat. You said humans are pack animals. You made me part of your pack for 10 hours. I will not betray my pack." The storm broke at dawn. The sky over Arcturus 6 cleared into a brilliant, crystalline gold. The landscape was transformed. The sand had been fused into sheets of glass, and the rocks were covered in a fine, shimmering frost of salt. Jonas opened the hatch. The air was crisp and smelled of ozone. Kira stood at the threshold. She looked out at the desolate beauty of the world she had almost died on. She reached into a small pouch on her belt and pulled out a fragment of her homeworld, a bioluminescent seed that glowed with a soft, pulsing green light. "It will not grow here," she said, placing it in Jonas's hand. "But it will remind you that there are things in the dark that are not enemies." Jonas reached into his pocket and pulled out the geode he had been holding all night. He cracked it open, revealing the purple heart within. He gave her half. "So we can find each other again," he said, "in case the universe gets lonely." Kira's mandibles spread in a wide, clicking smile, the first genuine one he had seen. 3 months. Jonas Hale. My rotation ends. I will find a way to take a scouting mission back to this sector. Bring proper coffee. I wish to see if it is as terrible as you claim. I'll have it ready, Jonas promised. He watched her walk away. She didn't stagger this time. She moved with the grace of someone who had stopped trying to prove she was worthy and had simply decided that she was. Jonas returned to his bunker. He sat at his desk and looked at the green glowing seed. For the first time in 6 months, the silence of the shelter didn't feel like a shield. It felt like a waiting room. He opened his terminal and began to write his report. But he didn't write about mineral veins or volcanic activity. He wrote about the electromagnetic properties of compassion. He wrote about the persistence of kindness. He realized that he didn't need to be alone to be himself. He just needed to find the right kind of broken to fit alongside. Outside, the suns of Arcturus 6 rose higher, reflecting off the glass plains. The storm was over, but the bridge remained. Jonas Hale, the man who loved rocks, finally understood that the most precious thing you can find in the dark isn't a crystal. It's a hand reaching back. 3 months later, the proximity alarm sounded again. Jonas didn't grab his wrench. He didn't check the shields. He put the kettle on. The sensor showed a single biological signature, moving with a familiar, rhythmic gait. Jonas opened the hatch before she even reached the door. Kira stood there, her armor polished, her ears high and proud. She held a bag of what looked like very expensive, very illegal Valkyrie silk. "The coffee," she clicked, stepping into the airlock. "Is it ready?" Jonas smiled, a warm, genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Always. Welcome home, Kira." The hatch closed, sealing out the harsh world of Arcturus 6. Inside, the heaters hummed, the coffee brewed, and for two beings from different stars, the universe was finally, perfectly quiet.